Peace and blessings, fam. Adam Jackson here with another episode of the Sacred Sons podcast. Sacred Sons, we talk a lot about the lack of connection that exists in the world. And at Sacred Sons, we are looking to connect men to their hearts, connecting us to each other. And today's guest, he is one who is bringing people from all walks of life together in an attempt to bring focus on what is most important to us, and that is our home, this earth. So what does environmental guardianship look like in this age of union? That's the question I'm proposing today. And with that, our guest today, his name is Dax Dasilva. Dax is the founder of Age of Union, an impact-driven environmental initiative, and he is the executive chair of the tech company Lightspeed Commerce. Please welcome Dax Dasilva.
Thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
Dax, where are you checking in from today?
I'm here in Montreal.
Oh, nice. I'll just start right there. Environmental guardianship. What was the point or the moment in your life where you took this upon yourself as your mission?
Yeah, I mean, I think I began my beginnings as an environmental activist when I was a teenager. And, I always grew up really being surrounded by the natural beauty of British Columbia, where I grew up near Vancouver. My parents were refugees from Africa. So we did kind of the inexpensive outdoor activities, the camping and all of that, fell in love with the animals, the natural landscapes. And when I was a teen, there was an event called the War in the Woods. Where they were logging 1,000-year-old trees all across Vancouver Island. And in particular, there was this one area called Clayoquot Sound. The protesters were protesting, and me and my stepbrother took my Mustang and drove across the island to join the protests. We were like 17. And at the end of the day, we won the protest. It paid off. It worked. I've revisited Clayoquot Sound. I think only now as an adult do I realize what we actually saved and how precious it was. Wow. But it was that drive across the island where we drove through hours and hours of clear-cut moonscape. That's what turned me into an activist, to see everything we lost for hours and hours driving across the island to get to Clayoquot Sound. And I knew that, I was already started in tech. I was a real nerd at age 13. I was already building software. So I knew that was going to be my career. And I did build Lightspeed. I was CEO of Lightspeed for 17 years. I just became the executive chair and just went full-time conservation with Age of Union. But I knew back then, at some point, I'd have the resources, the experience, the knowledge, and the plan to come back to conservation, which is a deep part of my heart, and a big part of my spirituality is what responsibility can we take for what we're doing and for this planet where we're in control, and so we have to be the guardians that this place needs us to be.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that you used the tech economy and abundance to build this now version of your life where you're fully in this. And I see that you have 4 pillars of Age of Union, which are leadership, culture, spirituality, and nature. And so you just gave me the nature. Give me something about the spirituality, like a memory, a story, or a piece of you that called this to become one of your pillars.
I think at the same time as I started the Lightspeed journey, I started my tech company in 2005, the age of 28. At the same time as I began that journey, I also began a spiritual journey in terms of, I'd made a conversion to Judaism, and I was raised Catholic, but there were, I just had a few things come together, and I continued my journey, as a Jewish man. And
that's not an easy task either, is it? That's a long road to convert to Judaism.
Didn't happen overnight. It was something that it's not for everybody's path. It's certainly not what I'm recommending for everybody, but everybody should have a path that they're deepening their spirituality with. And I think that that's the main recommendation of this pillar of the book. Yeah. But because before Age of Union was, as you mentioned, before it was an environmental organization, it was this book where I got my 4 pillars of like, what are the ingredients of being a change maker? And I think the spirituality piece is so important because there is that leadership piece and there's that culture piece, that human piece. But if you want to do something for the greater good, and that's what spirituality is, doing something for being something and doing something for something bigger than you, then you have to draw upon something that's bigger than you. And I think the biggest mistake that we make is thinking that it's all us. The problem with it being all us is that it's a lot on your mental health. And you can claim all the successes, but then you're stuck with all those failures on your own. And when you have a spiritual foundation that you build for yourself, of course, you put in your best effort. Of course, you try to be the perfect instrument and perfect conduit for that spirituality, but you're never alone. There will be a wind that takes you further than you could on just you. And that's, I think, when you're trying to do something bigger, you want to align that. You want to be a part of a bigger purpose, and that's what I personally found in that exploration that is the Jewish faith. But I also take great inspiration from a lot of indigenous faiths that are very nature based, and of course all religions. I studied religious studies. I'm a student of spirituality, so I think it's important because as I was doing that entrepreneurial journey, the spiritual journey at the same time helped me do everything in that entrepreneurial journey. It was the support and the foundation of that roller coaster.
We have to have a foundation. And the foundation, like you said, being something that is more than just our own journey is so vital. And I love how you're bringing in the spiritual diversity, cultural diversity into the conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know your exact background or your roots, but I can look at you and tell, just like myself, that you are made up of many cultures.
Yeah.
We as human beings on this earth in North America in 2023, we're an embodiment of actual diversity. It's not something that lives outside of us that's conceptual. It's real. Yeah. It's real to our life experience. So I love how you're bringing that into, the spiritual conversation, but also your success in business. Like that's a powerful concept. That spirituality could be this motivator for business.
I think it's you can be a real support and strength for your whole organization. On your, of course, it's great if there are people that have strong faith within the company, but even you alone having that, being that rock of strength, you can be that steadiness for your organization. I think that people, without knowing all the details, could tell that there was a spiritual leader at the core of the organization. We were able to go through, we went public in Canada, and then in New York, we went through 7 years of bootstrapping.
This is with Lightspeed.
7 years of bootstrapping, 7 years of venture capital where we raised $300 million, and then we did 2 IPOs, one in Canada and one in New York, and raised billions for the public phase. This journey doesn't come without all sorts of like hiccups is a small way to put it, but there's all sorts of stuff that happens that's that can rock you. Yeah. And so I think it's that foundation, that rock, that anchor, that if you don't make that investment, you can't be that for the rest of the team. Then you're like a leaf in the wind.
Yeah. What was a moment that rocked you? Like on this podcast, I like to tell stories from brothers' lives that people can connect with. And like, man, you're here as a testament to consistency and hard work and these pillars leading to success. But what was a moment where you were just like, I don't know if I got this, where you really had to come back to your foundation?
Yeah, I think it was, it's one of those moments where not just one thing happens, but 3 things happen. There was a personnel crisis at the company between, you know, I won't go into details, but there was a real crisis that was about to explode inside the company. There was early investors wanted our company sold so they could get their money back out. This is pre-IPO, and a friend of mine who I rescued from Mexico. He got into a knife fight on the beach. He was struggling with alcoholism. I rescued him, brought him back to my house, and at night he was drinking through all of my bottles. And I loved this friend of mine, but I didn't know how to help him, and he was causing himself harm and chaos. And those three things together. I remember editing an online magazine for a side project I had. On top of this, I had an art gallery side project. I'm editing the online magazine, and I felt half my face freeze.
Oh, wow.
And I woke up the next morning after about 2-3 hours of sleep, woke up the next morning, picked up my French tutor, and she says, your face isn't moving. Part of your face isn't moving. And I thought I was having a stroke. And we went directly to my doctor. He's like, no, this is Bell's palsy. And I had now, I tell people that I was able to manage all of this mentally, and maybe because of my spirituality, I was able to take it all in stride. But there's a moment where the body's like, okay, you might think you can handle this mentally, but we can't handle this. You know,
right?
Your body can't handle this. Message from your body. You know, so. Yeah. I think that there's moments where you got to be careful, you know. I think the spirituality and the mental health helps, you know, to go through the difficulties. But I think you got to also think about the holistic you. Yes. And what could I do to prevent that situation? I don't think anything. But that's, I think, a moment where you think of yourself less as just this Superman character, or you know, and also just flesh and bone, that no matter your strength and no matter your faith, and no matter how well you are equipped to deal with multiple situations, you're also human. So that's and I think people that go through health challenges where, you know, they suddenly are now struggling with something where they could do everything before. I mean, I was felt in that situation. I remember the next day after that happened, I was called into a lunch with new investors that wanted me to buy out the ones that wanted to sell. And I was having lunch with them with this new condition, and the soup was dripping out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know what to say to you. I said, we got to sell the company. And we didn't. At the end of the day, all the investors worked out. In the end, it all, and then 2 years later, we're a public company. And a lot of things ended up being resolved. You know, there's in some ways, not all of it, my friend's battle was lost with alcoholism. But yeah, you know, there's those moments where the soup's dripping out of your mouth and you're like, things have changed, you know, like I'm not the same person, right? At least right now, you know? And
in that moment, for me, it's like, Dax, my brother, slow down. Don't go to the meeting. You know what I mean? Like this is a physiological slow down sign, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just sensing there's this part of you that's like never going to give up. And like that amount of resilience. Yeah. Is that, I mean, yeah, speak to the resilience that it took.
Yeah, I think going to the meeting, is that, you know, it's just, it's that entrepreneurial determination that you're going to do it. And maybe a little bit of it was like, you know me as somebody that won't ever give up, but you may need to see me right now. Wow. You may need to see me eat soup right now. Like I would never be giving up on this, you know? Yeah. And maybe the message was, maybe you shouldn't either. Maybe you should find a new leader, but like I'm in the moment broken. And I wasn't forever, you know, I think I came back from that and so on. But yeah, that was like, maybe it was a little bit of you guys have to see where I am. Yeah. It's a big piece of vulnerability to let them see you. Right. And it brings up for me that even in business, even amidst all of the doings that we have as humans in 2023, it's the relationships. It comes back down to our relationships with each other.
those are the meaningful things. And like, yeah, I want to shift into culture a little bit as a pillar.
Yeah.
And so, what's the culture that you're creating right now within Age of Union?
Yeah. Let's zoom out a tiny bit on culture. I mean, it's so interesting. Sometimes we hear these conclusions that humans are parasites on this planet, right? Like every other animal contributes back to the ecosystem. They're part of a cycle, and we just take, and we don't really participate in the cycle, or not in our current incarnation. But what we do bring onto this planet that's unique is culture, right? The beauty of what humans can create with our imagination and our creativity, whether it's music or film or art or
yes.
That's the beauty of humanity, right? And that's the thing that can penetrate, like somebody's not on the same page as you, and you really want to help them understand or your experience art or a film or one of those.
It's music for me is like always the connector.
Yeah. Can break through. Two cultures that never talk can dance, right? They can dance, like they can enjoy each other's music, right? And that's actually part of why Age of Union's got an art center, why we've been doing, like, we're a year and a half old. We've done multiple films. We just had a film. I think one of the proudest things one of the things I'm most proud of in our year and a half is we put out a film like 7-8 months ago called Caught. It was done with Sea Shepherd in Sea Shepherd, France. It was about 10,000 dolphins being caught in the fishing nets off the coast of France because of the way the situation is, and because of the big trawlers that are not French, but the big trawlers coming off coast, and then the dolphins have to go closer inland because there's no fish left, and then they collide with the French fishing fleet, sadly, and they're washing up by the thousands, and that's a new thing, and the French people don't even know there's dolphins until we made a film and until Sea Shepherd France. 7 months later, this cultural document that we did for a few $100,000 and didn't know if it would make any difference got the law changed.
Wow.
And that's because
that was because of that came through culture. Yes, I love it.
That came through culture, right? That came through culture. That came through. We did 2 premieres. We did one in Toronto. We did one in Paris, and of course the campaign that Sea Shepherd France did, which was this is almost like performance art. Which is also culture. They took some of the dead dolphins and brought them to the front of the Eiffel Tower. They brought them to the front of the National Assembly and said, "These are dolphins caught in the nets on our coasts." And people walking by to their seafood market are like, "We didn't know there was dolphins." Like, do you know that it costs you the lives of these dolphins because of the way we're fishing? And so there was enough public pressure to have the French court order the French government to change it. And 10,000 dolphins a year is extinction within a few years. There's not hundreds of thousands of dolphins off the coast. So that's the kind of thing where it just makes me and the team and partners like Sea Shepherd, like, we got to use culture. We got to use communications. We got to use the human tools that reach the human heart.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is we have to create a culture of awareness and compassion versus a culture of consumption, which is what we've become, Yeah,
and there's a couple of ways, and I did go through this in the book. There's a couple of ways to define culture, right? There's the modes of culture, or the modes of expression, and then there's our behavior, right? And we need to upgrade our behavior, like you're saying. We've got to get out of this like 80s sort of like conspicuous consumption kind of culture, or this accumulation culture.
Right.
That's empty, that never makes anyone happy. We all pretty much know that, into something that's more meaningful, right?
Right. And in a way, you are bridging that in your life. And I'm not saying Lightspeed wasn't meaningful. I just imagine that win that you get and that feeling you get when Caught wins the awards, it leads to policies and laws being changed. That win, it might even feel better than raising $300 billion. I don't know. I don't know. I'm putting it back to you there.
It does. It does. There's no question. I mean, what Lightspeed does for the independent retailers and restaurateurs in our neighborhoods is very, very important to be able to give the little guys the tools to compete with the big box. That's a great mission. 3,000 people get up every day at Lightspeed to make sure that local sustainable businesses have technology also. It's a great mission. But when you're saving lives and helping communities in this way, on this, this is a time sensitive topic, the environment. We got a decade, I think, to turn it around onto a good trajectory. That's what we call this, the decade of action. I think if I was doing anything else, with my time right now that I have the opportunity, I would think personally I was crazy. This is, I think, with what I'm able to do and what I've been passionate about. This is like the decade of it has to be a decade of transformation. It's got to be, or we're going to have a lot of losses coming up. I don't think that way. We have to make this we have to go to a series of wins, and we are starting to see them. But we all have to kind of start to get on the same page about what we want to see. Right.
Yes.
And then it becomes easier and easier. And I think it's easier for our goal at Age of Union is to show people that things can be done. When people see that things can be done, then everything changes. If everybody believes that nothing can be done, it's going to happen anyways, then nobody does anything and it happens, right? So showing people that things can be done and that ordinary individuals can make things happen. Like Sea Shepherd France's campaign, largely the work of one woman, Lamia Essamlali, and her fierce campaign to not let these dolphins be forgotten. And we joined her, we documented her campaign with COT and then got it out there, while she was campaigning, in France. 50 fishermen showed up at her personal house when the French court made this ruling to intimidate her. Oh, wow. It's these people take great risk and are brave, but one person, and she is following in the footsteps of Paul Watson, the founder of Sea Shepherd, who at the brink of extinction of not just one species of whales, but all whales about 50 years ago said, I'm not letting this happen. And took boats and put his boats and his life in between a whale or pods of whales and the Icelandic and the Japanese and the Norwegian fishing vessels. And he shut down whaling, him and his crews. The fact that 1,000 fin whales are now gathering in the southern oceans every year is unheard of. It's one person. So the power of the individual and the power of people to make things happen is we need more stories like this. That's how we pick our projects at Age of Union, is are there stories to tell about people like that to make all of us believe that individuals can make a huge difference in this?
Absolutely. And I hear the messaging in that. But what would be your message to a young person? I think like you're saying, this is a time of urgency. This is an all hands on deck moment. Whatever your idea is, whatever your passion is, it's time to get after it. But what would your advice be as someone who has done it and who is doing it? Yeah. What do you tell that person who's all fired up about their dream, about how they want to have impact in this arena?
Yeah. There is a section in the book too where it's there's seasons in life, right? I feel like a lot of folks, especially Gen Z, who I really love this generation, they're just they want to change the world like every generation does. They feel a lot of pressure to make it happen right now. I'll tell you just my experience. I think that your 20s is a time where you're building your foundation, you're building your world. You can start to contribute to that, maybe that bigger impact or some of those bigger things you can do. Maybe that will become part of your career. Maybe you will work in the nonprofit space, but you may end up being an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, an entrepreneur that builds the capacity, builds the influence for you to for you to then invest your time, invest resources in other ways. So I think everybody's got unique talents that allow you to contribute now, later. Yes. I think it's always important to sow the seeds of everything you're interested in like I started in computers when I was 13. But my degree, which I've actually just finished 20 years later, my university degree consisted of not only computer science, but environmental science, art history, religious studies, all these things that I owned an art gallery at one point. We're doing environmental work, computer science, and I have all this, this spiritual basis for what I'm doing. So over the years, I've watered all these little elements, and they've had their reasons to bloom, right? And they become a part of you. So never think that you're one thing. In your 20s, it may be the time to, or your teens, it may be the time to focus on one thing, but let a couple of other things be nurtured. And over time, in your 30s, as you're solidifying who you are, in your 40s and 50s, where you can really start to contribute to the world, or later in your 60s or 70s, 80s, where you can then help the next generation at the same time as making a difference. Not everything has to happen at once. I know everybody wants to be super impactful in the ideal way right away, but that's not how it happened for me. Not that I was impactful building my tech company, because I created employment. We created
the art, even just the art gallery is impactful. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like all of those
right.
things are meaningful. What I'm hearing, what I've also experienced in my journey.
Yeah.
There's a particular wholeness and a perspective that comes. I'm 42. So when I was around 40, I got to look at my life. Like imagine I have these sections and I just flipped it and I looked down on all of it so I could see how it was all connected. I played in a metal band for 10 years. I toured the world. I also was a mechanical engineer. I worked for a couple of environmental companies designing water quality sensors and instrumentation used to measure the effects of climate change on ocean currents. So I've done these things as well, where I've been the engineer in the meticulous, detailed drawings, and I've also gotten to a place where I get to utilize all of even the music and the poetry to create something a little bit bigger outside of myself. Even to the point with Sacred Sons, we put out an album last year. You know what I'm saying? Like it comes back around. The art, the culture, the spirituality. Let's go into leadership. Let's talk about embodied leadership, because that's what this is, that the holistic perspective of who we are, and then the range that we are able to offer. No matter what the task is, we get to utilize our gifts. What felt important to you about leadership to bring through as a pillar?
Yeah. It's an interesting topic in this time period. I think that at one point there was a certain conception of what a leader has to be: very type A, very very loud, extroverted, kind of warriorish. There's this sort, and I think that's certainly one kind of leader, but it wasn't the kind of leader I was. And
just saying, it's outdated. You wanted to say it. It's outdated.
It's outdated, right? It's
right.
And it's the world needs a big diversity of leaders, and that's when I started Lightspeed, the original members of the company, including me, all from the LGBTQ community, right? Yeah. We wanted to encourage all kinds of leadership, all kinds of voices, not necessarily the loudest voices. I also, being a programmer since I was 13, didn't see myself as a leader. I was a one-man show for a whole bunch of years until I started the company. Coded till 4 a.m. for the first 2 years of the company, and coded on like the third floor of this triplex, and then would come down to the second floor where the team was to talk to them. But at some point, they actually really wanted me to give them some like direction, like what's the plan, right? Yeah. So that's when I had to like really step it up as a leader, and really start to step out of my comfort zone, from somebody who was introverted to somebody that was serving his team. And it's that servant leadership and that humility and that being out. And I found that from that point on, every year I'd have to like rewrite my job description. And every year the job description would be something I was scared of. And every year it would be something that it was less something I loved doing and more something that I didn't know how to do. And of course I'd bring in new people that knew really how to do it, but I'd have to like be there with them, whether it was bringing all these finance folks so that we could go public, like I have no finance background. It's terrifying. Now I have to go on CNBC and talk to Jim Cramer.
But what you had and what you have, right? But what you had and what you have is a vision, right? I have to imagine when those guys are asking you for the direction, what they're really asking you for is like, where are we going?
Yeah. Yeah. And you now have to take that into new places. And I think that you also have to show your team that you're willing to be a leader with courage, that you're willing to put yourself in places that you're not comfortable and adapt and sometimes fail, because you're going to ask eventually the same of them. Right. You need to be that role model. You need to model what you want to see in your organization. You want to model courage. Right. Yes. And you want to also, you want to be a great listener. I mean, that's, I think, a huge part of, especially with this generation that's coming up. They want to be heard. They don't want top down. They are diverse. They want different perspectives brought to leadership. They don't want something hierarchical. If there's a decision being made, they want to make sure that everything's being heard and that it's all well explained, that it's transparent. I mean, I think those are making leaders better. Like those kinds of trends are making better leaders for organizations. And I think that it's never easy. Nobody's born knowing all of these different stages of what you have to go through as a leader. The world needs leadership. There's a huge lack of leadership in this world. Look at the politicians that nobody's so proud of. In every country. It's needed.
Yes, it's needed. And what we call that piece of non-hierarchical leadership is intersovereignty. And so that looks like we all have a role, we all have our responsibilities, and can we be sovereign in that and also in relationship with everything else that makes our responsibilities and our roles vital and important. And so I do like this understanding of that's again like kind of into the culture of leadership within an organization, how that can look. You mentioned that your team was all from the LGBTQ community. Is that correct?
The first few people.
The first few people.
Maybe the first 3 or 4 people. And then as people came into the company, I think it was everybody. It was like, but I think why people liked the company is that no matter who you were, everybody felt like they could get a fair shot at opportunity, and everybody could be themselves. And
I love the diversity. What I wanted to ask is, like, I want to invite this generation to come out of the identity politics. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like my identity is the mission versus like the greater mission, the environment, like our home is the mission, like what you're saying. And so making the space for the acceptance, for the diversity, for the inclusion, but without making the identity politics the mission. I think this is potentially the place where we misstep. When we because for an actual age of union, you understand what I'm saying? What that takes is.
I have a really interesting story about that. I haven't really shared.
Bring it through.
So in between Lightspeed and Age of Union was this gallery. We've talked a little bit about it in passing. At the 10-year mark of Lightspeed, I was burnt out. And of course, I don't know why I thought starting a new project would actually help me with my burnout, but see, it did, because I've had so many amazing, here in Montreal, it's cultural, artistic hub, right? Yeah. And when I came here in my 20s, there was so many amazing things that people did that I benefited from. And so I thought, you know what? No, this is my chance to give back and create an art center out of a Lightspeed office we just moved out of. It was kind of in the hipster part of Montreal called Milex, 12,000 square foot warehouse with on 2 floors with an outdoor pool. It was like a dream gallery, right? And today it's Age of Union, but for 7 years it was called Never Apart. And Never Apart, for 7 years, we did great. And I would now, in retrospect, I would characterize it as identity art. Okay. So we had people from every different community, with the LGBTQ community, the different Black communities, Indigenous communities, women's groups. Sometimes it was just arts communities like video mapping or this or that. Like there was different communities, but a lot of it was gender or ethnic. And but there was a moment, with COVID, where I felt like the positivity of that shifted. Yeah. Where people started to, because people became anonymous on the internet, and this was becoming less about building bridges when nobody would ever say this stuff to each other when we were gathered in the center. But online, people start to shoot at each other, and we start to be more divided along identity instead of enjoying our identities through art and gaining understanding and actually creating friendships, that's what, when the center was open, a lot of new friendships that would have never been created without the center were created across communities. Yeah,
the art is the magnet for the gathering. The gathering is when the magic happens.
Art, the performances, the discussions, all of that. But when COVID hit in this internet age of like this accelerated internet age of like shooting people, like, not physically, but like, you know what I mean, right?
Canceling people, taking people down, shooting people,
all this stuff down. Happened to us, happened to people that had worked tirelessly for the community to build things, got shot down because because of this, or because they found out that I'd visited Israel and I was Jewish, and now I'm like, I suddenly hate Palestinians, where that's completely untrue. It's just people make all these assumptions because they want to create a narrative about you. Right. And that's when I realized that instead of circling the wagon on identity, because we did an amazing body of 7 years of work on identity art. And I think a lot of positive came out of it when we were gathering, when we were face to face and we were able to talk about things. But now I thought with Age of Union, we're going to bring our identities to the table for a purpose. And I saw all those people come for the opening of Age of Union, whether it was the Black community, the trans community, the Indigenous community, they came for the opening and they were excited to work together for something.
Yes.
Purpose, and not just go circle the wagons on identity for forever. And that's a lesson for me. It was a bit of a risk to be like, will I be able to bring all these people along to this new mission? And I realized it was the best way for us to refocus our energy instead of continuing this discussion that had become unhealthy about a purpose and what's the. And I think everybody's concerned about that critical, time-sensitive issue, which is the planet, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I look forward to a time where it's not like, who do you love or what's your favorite color? But it's like, how are you contributing to the greater mission? How are you contributing to humanity? How are you contributing to the environment? Right. Like that's how I want to, greet people and understand really what that individual and collective contribution that we are all a part of is.
100%. Even like, I'm not American, but I mean, even the political spectrum regarding the environment, it's not a political issue,
at all.
Yeah, at all. I don't know if I know there's lots and lots of there's maybe more climate criticism on the right, but do the folks on the right know that most of the national parks were created by conservatives? That some of the greatest environmental work were done by Republican and conservative presidents that cared about nature and wilderness and biodiversity? It's like, this is owned by everybody. It's like everybody should claim their successes and try to want to do more. So it's even that
speculation that if you're conservative, then somehow you're not for the environment. You know what I'm saying?
Wrong. It's wrong. Yeah.
Because I would probably argue if you go talk to really conservative people and get down to it, they are actually in some cases more connected to the environment than, you know, people who are in urban settings protesting on city blocks.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, like, we have to stop othering each other such that we can come back to the real thing of importance. And, you know, I don't claim to know why there's like this opposing force that wants to continue to divide and conquer. I mean, ultimately, I imagine it's about power and money and the usual suspects. How do we flip, Dax? I'm like really seeing you. I'm seeing, like, you know, your passion and the service that you're bringing to this world. How do we flip this narrative? How do we flip out of the consumerism, like everything being about chasing money, to coming back really to reciprocity and to abundance?
Mm-hmm. I think for me it starts really simple in terms of the things that we do on a daily basis. You know, I love the idea in Judaism of the mitzvah, right? And I think you can transpose it to everything we do, right? What is a mitzvah? It's taking something physical that you do, but you have an intention behind it, right? I'm going to eat this because there's a purpose behind it. There's a reason I'm doing this action because there's a reason I'm doing this for intention. We operate on an autopilot and without a lot of meaning. But what if the things that we did, maybe start with 2 or 3 things that we did and maybe over time extend to everything we did? What if the things that we did had the intention to be part of the greater union? You know, I'm biking because because I want to, first of all, be in nature and I want to not contribute to carbon. Or I'm going to eat one vegan meal or one plant-based meal, out of my week or out of my day, because that's going to be a contribution, you know. Or I'm going to, make sure I'm conscious about the way I'm using containers. I'm going to make sure that people that are doing conservation get backing, because I know that when people care, the government notices and government cares. You know, those are the kinds of things where if you infuse your acts and your behaviors with meaning and purpose, you have meaning and purpose all day long. You know, then then you're not in an existential crisis. Your day reflects your intentions. Your day reflects your aspirations. And I think it's the small things that add up to having that feeling of fulfillment. And then what that leads to is, it leads to you being an instrument of change. And then ultimately, I think that's like my personal goal, is I want to be the perfect instrument for the things that I can do with my talents, with my day, with my time. You know, if everybody was a change maker, and I wrote the book Age of Union as a recipe for change makers, we had 8 billion change makers doing with their unique ability what they could do, instead of 8 billion individualists living the individualistic American, Canadian, North American dream. We'd have a different planet, right? So I think it starts with the individual, that eventually we're working for the collective. You know, I think we've lost that. But working with the collective comes automatically when the intention you're putting into everything is for the greater good. You know, when it's not just for you, I'm doing something because I'm conscious of the greater good. I'm conscious for animals. I'm conscious for water. I'm conscious for the air. I'm conscious so that's the kind of thing that we infuse into our daily acts, and we elevate it spiritually because we infused it with purpose.
I love that. Everything with intention, everything infused with purpose. The mitzvah, I believe it's a ritual. Is that correct? It's a transformation ritual.
Yeah, I mean, there's 613. It's everything from, like, you know, there's 613 of them. There's so many, right?
Oh, wow.
But it's the idea of them, whether it's whether it's something to do with a prayer, or it's the way that you're doing, the way that you're eating, or the way that you're spending your day, or like but it's the idea that you do physical mundane tasks with an intention, yes. and that's where you connect our material world with the spiritual world, because you draw down spirituality into something very mundane and physical, and you bring it all together. And that's when you have, spirituality in your day to day. And why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah. And in fact, that's kind of like the function of us as humans, to bring it back to what you said in the beginning. It's not that we're a cancer upon this earth. Like we don't have to continue on with this narrative that's only existed since the Industrial Revolution, or maybe you can say the agricultural revolution. But what does it look like to really see ourselves as cultural creators to bring more beauty to this world? It could be as simple as that. When it comes down to it.
And listen, like if the people that are creating content that they're spreading consciousness, spreading ideas about how we could live, all of that stuff. Like you could be creative. You could create art that inspires people. You create music that inspires change. There's all sorts of things that we can bring forward and be influential. It's there's a whole world that has different opportunities for people of different talent. It's just infinite.
Yes. And brothers and sisters who are listening, we need you in the game. If you're interested, check out Age of Union. I'm sure there's multiple ways to donate, to get involved. Not only did you release Caught, I think you have another movie, Jungle Keepers. You're doing a lot of work with Indigenous folks, and just like some really incredible things happening over on that front. I really appreciate what you're building, but I also just really appreciate this essence of a Renaissance man that I'm experiencing in you, with the science background, with the art, with the business, and ultimately embodied leadership. This range that I'm speaking to, like this is what embodied leadership is. To have that full range, to be able to then bring people together around a common vision or a common mission. That's it.
It's been a pleasure.
So with that, Dax, is there any final message, any final piece of inspiration that you would like to leave with the brothers and sisters who are listening?
Yeah, I would say I'd come back to that thing where it's like, plant those seeds, plant those seeds, water those seeds, that all those little sparks of things that are a part of you. As I told you my story, there's a tech company, there's an art gallery, there's an environmental project, there's a spiritual journey. Those are all seeds that I had from an early age.
Yes.
That I just read books, like watered, like had experiences, and now they're just so woven together into one thing. My environmental group has technology as a part of it, has art as a part of it. Like they come together. So I think that's like. I think that's what I would leave with people is, celebrate those seeds, water them.
Yes. Water those seeds. And with that, we have to have this understanding of patience, and that everything in its 100%. Right time and its right gestation, because if we overwater it, right, the one that we really want to grow, like sometimes we end up killing it.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that in your story. It's like, yeah, there's no rush in knowing that those seeds will come to fruition.
Couldn't have done some of the later projects without the early ones being at a certain level of complete or finished. Like they had to happen in that order. It's like the patience is such a key piece of maybe what's less understood in this immediate gratification society, but things do need time to grow. You can't replace experience in the equation. It is time. It is your journey that allows you to unlock new levels for yourself, or who you can be for a project. It's such a forgotten attribute to have patience, and I think I'm glad you touched upon it.
Yeah. Brothers, if you're interested, Sacred Sons will be in British Columbia. We're coming to Gambier Island, July 5th through 9th. for our EMX, the Embodied Masculine Experience. Dax, I will email you a personal invite in case you can make those dates. I asked you earlier if you did any men's work, but what we're doing is we're bringing men together, and ultimately, a lot of the things that are happening in terms of impact on this planet come from the decisions of men. And not that it can't be men and women and everyone, but we're working specifically with men to cultivate this leadership, to cultivate the spirituality, and ultimately to bring that connection back into our hearts. Because as men, when we lead from the heart, real change happens, positive impact. Like this is a shared vision that I feel like many of us have, and it's time. It's time. Yeah. All right. Dax Dasilva, Age of Union. Check out Age of Union, the book, and the new community. Adam Jackson, Sacred Sons. We're out, family. Peace.